Howdy folks, a bit of a different video today in that instead of Colorado, I'll be sharing my first experience outside the anglosphere when I visited Austria and Croatia for a cousin's wedding last year. The general route taken was flying into Salzburg, spent a night there, road trip to Hinterthal, spent a few days and the wedding there, and then road trip down through Slovenia and into the Croatian town of Vodnjan, where our Airbnb was. I will butcher every single place name, I'm sorry about that. A couple things I noticed about Salzburg. It turns out it's the hometown of Mozart, and the town let you know that as often as possible, and the city was absolutely covered in graffiti, as were most of the towns I visited. Not sure why I was surprised, given all the major cities in the States are tagged, but it seemed more of a bummer, and it hit a bit different to see all over these cities, and in certain cases buildings, that have been around for hundreds of years. I was also kind of surprised how much of the graffiti was in English, and the majority of what I could read seemed to be anti-fascist or anti-capitalist. Not sure what to make of that, but there you go. I only spent a single night in Salzburg, so that's pretty much all I can give you there. As far as Hinterthal goes, I was told it was sort of a Telluridian or Aspen-like getaway for Austria's rich people to go skiing, and it sure looks the part, though without quite such a degree of corporate antiseptic. And while it looks like it could be at an elevation of 9 or 10,000 feet, it's actually only about 3,200, so if you have problems with altitude sickness, you'll probably be okay there. In addition to skiing, which being there in July was obviously not advisable, there are some walking paths and hiking trails, one of which leads to these neat little waterfalls I was told were called the Drips. Accurate enough. Again, I wasn't there long, just a few days, so I really can't give you much more than that. That said, if you want a wedding venue to blow your friends out of the water, Hinterthal's a good spot. Some things I noticed about Austria in general I found amusing or interesting. The average age of the cars on the road are all very new, only a few years old, far newer than your average car on the road here in the States. The beers are bigger, shocking, I know, and instead of building roads to contour the mountains, it seems like they just prefer to burrow straight through them. The tunnels were everywhere. There were also cigarette vending machines, and the boxes of said cigarettes were covered in nasty images of lung cancer and other grody things like that, something I have heard of, but never actually seen in person until I visited. After Austria, it was off to Croatia, specifically a region called Istria, which was at one time part of Italy and is the regional center of the truffle trade. The Airbnb was a fancy mansion type thing designed specifically for big groups like ours, which had a pool, sauna, and game room. I don't remember what it cost, but I do remember that divided by the number of people staying there, it wound up being pretty cheap for what it was. While in Istria, we visited the 6th and best preserved Roman Colosseum located in the city of Pula, of which a self-tour cost about $10. It's worth a visit if for no other reason than to exploit for photographic opportunities, and it's pretty neat they still use it as a venue for music and film. Following that, we chartered a boat from a local guide outside the town of Rakalj toward the tiny town of Turkget. 35 euros each got us a 6-ish hour round trip where we could bring and drink our beer, a few stops along the way so people could go swimming where, future warning, there very well may be old naked people on the shore. It also got us the knowledge and comments of the captain, and a stop for a few hours for some lunch, which was both very tasty and very reasonably priced. I didn't really take any pictures, sorry, but I did get some footage of the marina at Rakalj. The next day was a trip to, which I didn't know at the time, is the hometown of race car driver Mario Andretti. The town of Motovan is the unofficial capital of Croatia's truffle region, and about as much of a picturesque medieval town as one could ask for, though admittedly my dataset is quite limited in that regard. Plenty of shops, plenty of restaurants, and plenty of influencer cachet. While there, I had a taste of truffle ice cream, and you might say, why would you ruin perfectly good ice cream with a fungus? Shut up, it's delicious. And $12 for a few small scoops. A note about this area and truffles in general: while it's known to be a highly expensive thing here in the States, the prices of truffle-related items really aren't bad if you're there. Not that you can't spend exorbitant amounts of money if you want to, but it certainly isn't a requirement to enjoy some excellent food. The last full day in Croatia consisted of recovering from hangovers, like many days on this trip, and was capped with a trip to Rovina for dinner. Rovina, like every place we have been, was very pretty and very touristy. The dinner here was a bit more on the expensive side, but again, entirely worth it, or would have been if I had been the one paying. After that, a quick cocktail at a seaside bar, and off to bed for a 10 a.m. flight out of Pula back to the States. Some general things I noticed about Croatia that I didn't necessarily expect. Wine, olive oil, and truffles are big here. Rather shocking, being on the Mediterranean, I know. At the end of many of these lunches and dinners, the waiter would bring out a couple bottles of liqueurs, one of which was based on honey and one on grapes. Traditionally, the honey would be for the ladies and the grape for the guys. Might have gotten that backwards. Either way, both were tasty, and in one instance, the waiter just gave the bottle to the person that bought the lunch as a thank you for a generous tip. There were also these little stone huts everywhere that went back to ancient times, and I guess were used by herders to get out of the heat. The average age of the cars here was much older, and for me as a car person, was much cooler to see than the current model year boxes you see in Austria, or the States for that matter. There were also some things that I noticed that seemed to be generally European that I also found interesting. Such things are public bathroom stalls that completely seal up the gaps around the door. Ironic considering there are more lax attitudes towards nudity in general. Cigarette smoking seemed to be far more commonplace and much less of a social stigma than in the US. For example, the airports had indoor smoking lounges. Work safety also seemed to be far more relaxed and less bureaucratic than here in the States, which, as somebody in a blue-collar industry, have mixed feelings about. For example, that bar we visited after dinner in Rovina, it was basically just a bunch of cushions on rocks by the sea. Something definitely not Bush approved, and it was awesome. The people also seem to be both less fat and less diverse than here in the States, and cash is definitely something you're going to want to have on you. A couple other miscellaneous things: prepare to pay for parking everywhere. Croatia does not currently use the euro, they use the kuna, at least until next year when the euro is adopted. And I've never felt more stupid than trying to communicate to somebody in their home country that didn't speak English. Regardless, everybody was very nice. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. I highly recommend visiting both if you ever get the chance. In the meantime, I'll be back to my irregularly scheduled Colorado content shortly. Or not. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.